Namaskar friends, I am Sanjay Mansukhani from Kolkata. I am a teacher of Patanjali Yoga Sutras, and today, dear friends, we will be covering the three most powerful, important angas, limbs of Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga is the practice, is the sadhana which has been prescribed by Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras. In his second chapter on sadhana, in the Yoga Sutras, he mentions that Ashtanga Yoga is the method, is the process, is the practice by which one can achieve the highest form of samadhi. One can achieve Kaivalya by this process. Kaivalya means where the soul and Prakriti, they are able to separate out from each other. And this leads to the end of all sorrow. Once when the sadhana, the practice of Ashtanga Yoga is done to its completion, one reaches the stage where the mind eventually disappears. And when the mind disappears, dear friends, all the cause of sorrow, all the cause of pain and suffering disappear. Because it is the mind which is formed out of the coming together of the soul, the Atma, the Purush and Prakriti. And this mind, which initially comes in as the cosmic intelligence, turns into an individual intelligence and then creates the whole structure of the mind, the ego, the mind, the five organs of sensing, the five organs of action, the five tanmatras, which are the five subtle elements of Prakriti, and the five gross elements of Prakriti. So this entire creation, this entire existence for an individual comes out when the Purush and the Prakriti come together and the cosmic intelligence is triggered, is the first manifestation. So we see the mind is the first output from Prakriti, is the first evolute from Prakriti. And from the mind, the whole structure of the mind, the so-called mind stuff, arises this physical world, this physical universe, this whole creation. Dear friends, if we are able to control the mind, then we in a way are able to control the way the world impacts us. We are able to control the way the world influences us. And most of our human suffering is actually caused by the world outside, by the samsara outside, by the universe outside. So in Ashtanga, Patanjali, in the first five angas, the first five, I would say, the methods of practice, is working at the level of the body, is working at the level which is outside. And in the last three angas, the last three limbs, the last three methods of the yogic practice, he is actually working on the inner side. He is working directly on the mind. In the first five, the mind which is busy in the world outside is brought in through sadhana, through practice, through the practice of yama, niyama, asana, pranayama and pratyahara. And once it is inside, then the additional higher work happens here. And therefore, the three inner limbs of Ashtanga Yoga are the most powerful and the most important limbs of Ashtanga Yoga. Here is where the real yoga, as described by Patanjali, the real work takes place. I'm sure you remember that Patanjali has defined yoga as Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. What it means is the yoga is the stopping, the subduing, the controlling of all the thoughts which are appearing, which are getting triggered in our mind, in our chitta. Therefore, if the mind needs to be controlled, then the body is a gross way of controlling the mind. Our actions in the physical world outside is a gross way of controlling the mind. Our asana again is a gross way of controlling the mind. The pranayama again is a gross way of controlling the mind. But the most effective and the most powerful way, dear friends, of controlling the mind is with the mind. When the mind is used as a tool to work on itself, then the most powerful, the most effective work can be done on the mind. Therefore, the first step, the first ingredient is to bring our attention, to bring our awareness on the mind. Therefore, concentration. Concentration is a mechanism whereby we bring our attention, our awareness, our focus on one area of the mind. So it is the mind which starts focusing on one area of the mind, and it might shift in that area. The focal point might keep on shifting, drifting, moving in, moving out, but that is all right. That is what is the process of concentration. It takes time for the mind to stabilize. Once the mind has come in and is working at a place, it takes time for the mind to become one-pointed. It takes time for the mind to start focusing on one form or one image. But once that is done, then the second stage is that mind which has stabilized, which has become one-pointed, which is focused on one form, one object, one image, is consistently maintained at that point. It is held steadfastly at that point. It is not allowed to drift away under any condition. It is not allowed to get distracted by any other trigger from outside or from within the mind. And the third, after this has been done, after the mind has been held at a point for a substantial duration of time, the mind slowly, steadily starts disappearing. The mind slowly, steadily starts becoming so concentrated that its impact is so single-pointed, so focused, so minutely focused that it starts disappearing in a way. So now these three limbs of dharana, dhyana and samadhi, they are called internal, they are called antar. Antar means inside. And the first five are called bahar, that is, they are working on the outside, they are the external limbs. So one must remember that these three which are working on the inside, though they come the last, they are the most essential ingredients of the yogic practice which has been prescribed by Patanjali. And that is the way it has been practiced over thousands of years. Now once we are working on the internal limbs, on dharana, dhyana and samadhi, we find that the impurities in the mind, they start getting purified. The impurities in the mind, they start getting diminished. And in the earlier five stages, that is not happening, because in the earlier five stages, we are not actually working on the mind, on purifying the mind, but our entire attention, focus, concentration is on bringing the mind, which is habitually outside, to the inside and turning its attention inward. Therefore, that is the function of the first five limbs. That is why they are called the outer limbs. But these three inner limbs, dharana, dhyana and samadhi, they are working on the mind to purify the mind by using the mind. Now, Once when we are purifying the mind, then what do we mean by that? The purification of the mind means the soul, the Atma, the Purusha, its luminescence, its light, its knowledge, its power is covered up by a cloud of impurities, by a cloud of certain, you can say, vrittis or thoughts or sanskaras, memories, which have come in from the outside world. And these vrittis, these sanskaras, prevent the inner light from coming out. They prevent the inner glow of the Atma, the Purusha, from shining out. But when we start the cleaning up process, then we find all that is tamasic, all that is rajasic gets cleaned up, gets purified. It starts leaving the mind, and we are left only with sattva. Sattva is the purest form of prakriti. Sattva is the purest form of nature, purest form of thoughts. And this is formless in nature. This is transparent in nature, lucid in nature. So the inner light, the inner glow, the inner power, the inner shine of the Atma, the Purusha, now starts coming out. Therefore, the purification of the mind, the process of cleaning up of the mind, the process of empowering the mind, the process of increasing the capacity to hold knowledge in the mind starts happening only when we practice dharana, that is concentration, meditation, that is dhyana, and samadhi, that is total absorption of the mind. Dear friends, let me tell you, these higher states of dharana, dhyana and samadhi cannot be easily directly obtained without practicing the yamas and niyamas. Yamas are the social disciplines which a person has to follow as a vow 24/7, so that under no condition there is an infringement. And the niyamas are certain personal discipline principles, rules which one follows in life, so that one is able to tune the body, tune the mind, to start working deeper on itself. As has been said by many commentators, the five limbs, the first five limbs are only for working on the body, and the last three limbs are purely working on the mind. Now, dear friends, what exactly happens out here is that once when we understand the process of dharana, dhyana and samadhi, it begins by focusing, concentrating our attention on an object, on a form. And by beginning that process, we reach a state of meditation where that focus on that form, that object, single-pointedly, one-pointedly continues for a long duration. And then we reach that state of samadhi, which is considered to be the normally accepted samadhi. It is one of the starting levels of samadhi. Samadhi, there are 7 stages. So here we are talking about the second stage, and that stage is nirvitark samadhi. The samadhi begins with savitark samadhi. In savitark samadhi, our attention is focused on an object. But while we are looking at that object, we also remember the name of that object. We also know the description of that object. So these 3 factors, the object itself, the name of the object and the description of the object, those 3 things together keep on playing on our mind. Whereas if we are able to go deeper in concentration, then we separate out, we filter out the name and the description, and we are only left with the object of meditation in its particularity, with its specificness, and there is no other associated thought or any associated idea which remains in the mind of the yogi. So this is the samadhi which we are talking about, and the first 3 stages are fully therefore connected in the beginning stages of meditation and samadhi, that is connected with focusing on the object. You concentrate on the object, you meditate on the object, and you achieve samadhi on the object. But these three, even then, continue to be internal. And it is even said that since these are higher forms of yoga, there have been cases where certain individuals have reached these levels of yoga and due to certain reasons have left the body. But in the transmigration theory which we follow, as per yoga and Sankhya, it is said the chitta, the so-called mind stuff, carries all the information of the subtle body. It contains all the vrittis, all the sanskaras, all the karmas, all the kleshas, and then that information is carried forward, and that information finds for itself a new body suiting the kind of data it is holding from the previous life. Therefore, dear friends, it is highly likely that somebody has been a yogi and has reached the upper stages and has left the body, but his new body, the new chitta, there is a trace, there is a track, there is a record of what the yogi had experienced in his earlier lives, and that comes forward. So such a yogi can then carry forward from his higher attainments achieved in the last life, in the last birth, and move forward on the path of realization. Now here, one thing to remember is that even these three, the so-called internal limbs, are actually considered external. External to what? They are considered external to the nirbij samadhi, the asampragyita samadhi. Because the samadhi which we are talking about in the Ashtanga, in the 8th Anga, in the Ashtanga Yoga, that is a samadhi which is sampragyita samadhi, which is the sabij samadhi, and in this samadhi an object is there, an object of awareness is there, and sanskaras are made out of that object and the awareness which the chitta, the mind, captures and records. So in order to reach from dharana, dhyan and sampragyita samadhi to asampragyita samadhi, the first requirement is to achieve sampragyita samadhi in totality. Therefore, dear friends, it is said by experts that the first 5 limbs, the first 5 outer limbs of yama, niyama, asana, pranayama and pratyahara, they prepare the yogi and his mind for sampragyita samadhi. And as the yogi graduates further and reaches the 6th, 7th and 8th angas, limbs, and practices dharana, dhyana and samadhi, then he is now working towards nirbij samadhi, and here he achieves his sampragyita samadhi. So these 3 inner limbs, they become the cause of the sampragyita samadhi happening. Now the nirbij samadhi or the asampragyita samadhi, it can only happen when all the 8 limbs have been reached and they have reached their conclusion. That means ultimate proficiency has been achieved in them, and one is reaching, one is moving at the higher realms of the yogic practice. Therefore, there are 3 essential, one can say, subdivisions in Patanjali Yoga. The first major subdivision is the first 5 limbs which common people follow, and they bring their attention from the outer world to the inner world and are able to sort out many of their life's daily problems. The second is for the higher practitioner, for ones who are into higher yoga, who are wanting to go ahead into siddhis, into achieving liberation, kevalya. They practice dharana, dhyana and samadhi. And the third subdivision is of asampragyita samadhi. When you reach this state of asampragyita samadhi, then That is the ultimate goal which happens in yoga, and that is the ultimate goal we are looking at. So in order to understand it from a slightly different perspective, from the perspective of the 25 tattvas which have been given by Kapila Muni in the Sankhya Darshan, 25 tattvas of cosmic creation, we will see that in the beginning, in the first 5 limbs, the yogi is focusing on the Panch Mahabhutas. His attention is in the outer world. His attention is in the world of matter, inert matter, and his attention there is focused in Prithvi, Jal, Agni, Vayu and Akash. That is, his attention, his awareness is focused on the earth, on water, fire, air and ether or space. But as he starts pulling in, because as I said, Ashtanga Yoga is all about pulling in the attention from the outer to the inner and to as deep as possible, so that the final stage of Purusha realization is achieved, so that the attention comes in from the outermost Prithvi, the most tamasic element, gross element of Prakriti, to the all the tattvas, all the 24 tattvas of Prakriti, and it crosses over these 24 tattvas and reaches the 25th tattva, which is of non-Prakriti, which is the Purusha, which is pure consciousness, which is constant, non-changing, has none of the gunas, none of the qualities which Prakriti has. Prakriti has been going through constant change. Prakriti is constantly moving from form to non-form and back to form and shifting and dancing in these 3 gunas, whereas the Purusha is non-dancing. So how does one pull the attention back? So the first 5 limbs, they are in the outer world, in the Panch Mahabhutas. But the yogi now pulls his attention in. And when he reaches the stage of Pratyahara, his attention has come in. Once it has come in, that means it has reached the level of the mind, the manas. It is operating from within the senses, the sense organs, and their control has been achieved, and the attention has moved in from the world of objects through the sense organs into the mind. And as the yogi pulls it further inside, his attention shifts to the ego, to the ahankara, and then he pulls it further inside. It gets pulled in to the buddhi, to the intellect inside a yogi's chitta. And now the yogi moves further, progresses further, and pulls his attention further in. And when he pulls his attention further in, it reaches the state of Mahat, that is the cosmic intelligence from the individual intelligence of Buddhi. And he is able to pull it further in, and it reaches the state of the Mool Prakriti, the primordial Prakriti. But even now, his attention is in Prakriti, in the 24 tattvas, which are connected to Prakriti and their evolutes. So now what does a yogi do? A yogi now pulls it further back into Purusha, into the Atma, into the soul. And this is the ultimate stage where he reaches, and this is the goal which one achieves out of Ashtanga Yoga. So in Ashtanga Yoga, the mind is slowly, steadily moving through 7 stages of Samadhi. It moves and reaches the ultimate stage in the Purusha. So in the first stage of pulling the attention in, it moves from the outer world to the sense organs. In the second stage, it moves from the sense organs and further into the mind. In the third stage of Samadhi, it moves in from the mind to the ahankara or the ego. And then in the fourth stage of deeper concentration, the attention is further pulled in from the ahankara, from the ego to the intellect, to the buddhi. And here, from the buddhi, from the individual intelligence, it is further pulled back into Mahat, the cosmic intelligence, and then it is further pulled back into Prakriti, which is the Mool primordial form of Prakriti, which is the unmanifest form of Prakriti, and then the yogi further pulls it back in the seventh Samadhi, where he reaches into the Purusha. So dear friends, what we find here is that the 5 limbs is in the outer world. The next 3 limbs are focusing in the internal world, in the mind, and the last limb, Asampragyata Samadhi, Nirbij Samadhi, is focusing on shifting it out of Prakriti into Purusha. And that is what happens when the mind is shifted out from Prakriti into the Purusha. Now the yogi has no contact, no mental contact of any sort with the world outside. He does not remember his name, he does not remember where he is, he does not remember what time it is, he does not remember anything at all. And the mind, the chitta now virtually disappears, and he reaches the state of Purusha realization, Atma realization, soul realization. And because the chitta disappears, because now there is no chitta, then there is no mind, there is no basis for further meditation, and meditation comes to an end. Meditation enters a terminal stage. Now there is no further meditation because the mind has decimated itself, mind has terminated itself through these 7 stages of Samadhi. And dear friends, if the mind is not there, then where is the world? Because the world is perceived by us in the mind, in the chitta, in the mental structure we have. But if the mind itself is not working, if the chitta is not there, if the mental structure has disappeared, then there is no way one can perceive the world, sense the world, experience the world. So that world also disappears. But does that world disappear for all other people also? No, it does not. It only disappears for this particular yogi who has left Prakriti in all its evolutes in totality. He has left the 24 evolutes and entered into the 25th Tattva of Purusha. Therefore, for him the world has disappeared, for him the evolved Prakriti has disappeared, and he is alone in Purusha, and that is why he is free now. And he is in a state of Kevalya, absolute independence. But other people who are there, they are still experiencing their Prakriti, because there they have a mind, and their mind, because it is experiencing Prakriti, so Prakriti is existing for them. They are still able to perceive the 5 gross elements. They are still able to perceive the Panch Mahabhutas. So they have the objects to be perceived, they have the perceiving mechanism, the mind apparatus, and they have the Purusha who is busy seeing all the action, all that is happening in his world. So here a person is having a normal worldly existence. He is experiencing the world the way it is shaping up and working for him. So my dear friends, if you are looking for liberation, if you are looking for Kevalya, if you are looking for freedom from all sorts of suffering, pain, dukkha, sorrow, then the only proper way which has been suggested by Patanjali is the practice of Ashtanga Yoga. When you practice Ashtanga, you find your mind eventually disappears. You find that the source of all sorrow was actually the mind. All the thoughts were getting stored in the mind, and all the thoughts which are vrittis were becoming sanskaras, were becoming memories, were becoming karmas, and were pushing action in the world outside. It was continuing our life, the Jivan Chakram, and it was also triggering the next body after death. It was shaping up the next body in which the subtle body from the previous life was getting transferred. But if one is able with sadhana, with practice, with abhyas of Ashtanga Yoga, if one is able to remove the mind from the scene, then that is complete bliss. Then you are liberated from all suffering. And if you remember the definition given by Patanjali about this yoga, he said it is yoga chitta vritti nirodha. So he says yoga is when the vrittis in the chitta are permanently stopped. So now if the vrittis are permanently stopped, then there is bound to be no chitta, because the chitta is only there when the thoughts are there. A chitta or a mind is a collection of thoughts, is a storehouse of thoughts, is a memory house of thoughts. But if the data itself which needs to be stored is not there, then the reason for the data storage also disappears. So the chitta disappears, and all that you are left with is complete self-realization, complete Purusha realization. You reach the highest of the highest state of human existence. So dear friends, that was today's talk on dharana, dhyana and samadhi and its importance, because without it one cannot go through the 7 layers of samadhi, 7 stages of samadhi, and do away with the mind. It is only by working with the mind, only by doing dharana, dhyana and samadhi, one can actually remove the mind from the scene. And that is where one removes all the sorrow from the scene. And that is the goal of yoga. So thank you friends, thank you for being here, listening to this talk. The purpose of these talks are to bring about permanent happiness in human life. So once when you understand that by practicing Ashtanga, one can remove all sorrow, that means one can experience permanent happiness in one's life. And once you know the way to experience permanent happiness, you can always share it with your family members, you can share it with members of your society, you can also share it with people of your country, and on top of it, it can be shared with all the people of our world, and together we can heal our planet from all pain, sorrow and suffering. And once we are able to do that, once we are able to reach each and every family on this planet, then we can have a happy planet. We can have a planet where we can bring in Satyuga, the golden age, which is around the corner. So dear friends, the purpose of these yoga talks are to elevate humanity to the next level of Satyuga, to elevate humanity and reach a world where there is happiness, permanent happiness in each and every home, to reach a level where we can bestow a happy planet to all our children, all our coming generations. Thank you so much. God bless each one of you. See you tomorrow again. And if you can share this talk to like-minded people whom you think will benefit and will be able to achieve a cleanliness of their mind, a purity of their mind, and can take this yogic practice further, kindly do share with them. Thank you so much. God bless each one of you.